Hello, loves. I'm your Sonoran Desert Siren. Say the name out loud. Doc Holliday. In your head, do you see a gunslinger? A killer? Val Kilmer in a black coat, spitting blood and one-liners? Do you see the OK Corral? Do you see the most famous 30 seconds in the American Wild West? How about a hot prostitute named Kate in one arm and Wyatt Earp on the other side? But here's what the movie never explains. Doc Holliday was a terrible shot. He killed maybe 2 men in his entire life. He weighed less than 100 pounds. He was dying of tuberculosis. Most of us know that much. And the only reason he walked into that gunfight at the OK Corral at all was because his best friend asked him to. The epic part of Doc Holliday isn't the gunfighting. It's the friendship. A dying man who kept showing up for Wyatt Earp when every sane person would have stayed at home in bed. That's the story. This is History in the Raw, Episode 4, Part 1. Doc Holliday, the dying dentist, and the friendship that made him epic. John Henry Holliday was born in Griffith, Georgia in 1851. His father, Henry Furrows Holliday, was a Confederate major. His mother, Alice McKee, was a musically talented woman of deep faith, and she was dying of tuberculosis, the same disease that would eventually kill her son. Young John Henry sat by her bedside. He watched her cough blood into handkerchiefs. He watched her waste away. Historians believe that he contracted TB himself during those years of tending to her. Thanks, Mom. And on September 16th, 1866, when Henry was only 16, Miss Alice died. 3 months later, just 3 months, his father remarried a woman named Rachel Martin. The McKees were not pleased and sued to keep her inheritance from passing to Henry Sr. The family fractured. John Henry lost his mother and then watched his father replace her within 3 months. There was another loss too. In the Holliday household, there was an adopted older brother named Francisco Hidalgo, a Mexican orphan Henry had brought home from the Mexican-American War. Francisco was about 15 years older than John Henry and had enlisted in the Confederate Army. He died of tuberculosis in 1873. By the time Doc was 22, he had buried his mother, his adopted brother, and countless neighbors from the same disease. He didn't become violent because he was cruel. He became fatalistic because he was grieving. Why dentistry? Doc's uncle, Dr. John Stiles Holliday, practiced in Lafayette, Georgia. John Henry grew up around medical men. He was brilliant with his hands, precise, patient, mathematical. After his mother's death, he threw himself into his studies. He attended the Valdosta Institute, studying Latin, Greek, rhetoric, and mathematics. At 19, he entered the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery, one of the finest schools in the country, and graduated in 72 at age 20. 5 months before he was legally old enough to practice, so they held his diploma until his birthday. He opened a practice in Atlanta with Dr. Arthur C. Ford. They won awards at the Dallas County Fair, which was a big deal then, for best gold teeth and for best vulcanized rubber and for best artificial teeth. I mean, he was a nerd. He fixed teeth and built cavities in a starch white collar. He played piano. He loved opera. He was a Southern gentleman through and through, with a future. And then the coughing started. At 22, Doc was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And in the 1870s, this was a death sentence. It rotted your lungs. You coughed up blood. You wasted away. The humid Georgia air was killing him faster. So he did what thousands of dying Americans did back then. He headed west towards dry desert air. These people were called lungers. They traveled from the humid south and east to Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado, believing sunshine and dry air could outrun bacteria. Spoiler alert, most of them died anyway, in boarding houses and sanitariums, having spent their last money on a myth. Doc was one of those lungers. He chased the dry air from Georgia to Texas to Arizona to Colorado. And like most of them, the air didn't save him. It just gave him a different place to die. In Fort Griffith, Texas, Doc discovered two things. First, that dry air did not cure TB. Second, that he was pretty good at cards. He couldn't practice dentistry anymore. A man with TB leaning over your open mouth, coughing into your face, that was a hard no. No, that life was over. But Doc had a mathematical mind. He had learned cards growing up. He had discovered Faro, F-A-R-O, a fast-paced game that looked simple, but it's pure math and odds. Doc could calculate instantly. He was also known to cheat, though, using marked decks and rigged dealing boxes. When you know you're dying, bluffing and or cheating, or both, comes easy, I guess. What's the worst they're gonna do? Kill him? Here's what the movie gets wrong. Doc Holliday was not a good shot. Careful biographers have reviewed court records confirmed that Doc was involved in only 5 verified shootings in 15 years. He killed exactly 2 men, verified. His marksmanship was absolute shit, just terrible. In 1880, he got into an argument with a gambler named Johnny Tyler, a saloon owner who had thrown Doc out into the street. Doc came back with the gun, emptied his revolver, and hit the saloon owner in the palm and a poor bartender in the big toe. In a rifle contest in Tombstone, he ranked near the bottom. And in 1884, he shot a man named Billy Allen at close range and only wounded him in the arm. Doc was not a deadly marksman. He was a dying man. And he was absolutely fearless because he had nothing to lose. Men mistook that fearlessness for skill. Doc didn't drift because he was a romantic wanderer. He moved because he kept getting run out of town. In Dallas, he was arrested for trading gunfire with the saloon keeper. He was indicted for gambling illegally in Las Vegas in New Mexico. And he killed a man named Mike Gordon who was firing into the saloon, and then he had to flee. Every town he went to, he eventually had to go. Warrants, death, enemies. or his own coughing fits driving customers away. He was a fugitive from his own life and his own temper. And then in the winter of 1877, in Fort Griffith, Texas, Doc met the man who would make him a legend. Wyatt Earp was in town tracking an outlaw named Dave Rudebraw, who had robbed a Santa Fe railroad camp. Wyatt walked into the saloon and approached a faro table where a well-dressed gambler was dealing cards. That coughing man was Doc Holliday. Wyatt asked Doc, "Had you seen Rudebraw?" Doc said he suspected Rudebraw had doubled back to Kansas. Wyatt sent a telegram. The tip checked out and the outlaw was caught. It was a brief 2-minute meeting, just two gamblers trading information, but it was the beginning of something that would last till death. The friendship was sealed in Dodge City, Kansas in August 78. Wyatt was city marshal. A group of rowdy Texan cowboys, led by a man named Ed Morrison, rode into town, shot up the streets, and surrounded Wyatt. He was alone, outnumbered. His pistol was holstered. His life was in real danger. Doc Holliday was playing cards in the Long Branch saloon. He looked out the window and saw Wyatt surrounded. He asked the dealer, a guy named Frank Loving, for a pistol. Loving handed him his pistol, a 6-shooter from a drawer. Doc drew his own revolver as well, stepped out onto the street, and ordered the cowboys to throw up their hands. The move distracted them just enough for Wyatt to draw his own guns and take control. Wyatt never forgot it. Years later, testifying in a Tombstone courtroom, he said, quote, "I am a friend of Doc Holliday because when I was city marshal in Dodge City, Kansas, he came to my rescue and saved my life." When a man saves your life, you owe him. And Wyatt Earp played that debt for the rest of his days by turning Doc into an epic legend. They didn't just stay friends, they became family. Doc and his common-law wife, Kate, followed the Earps from Dodge City to New Mexico, to Prescott, Arizona territory, and eventually to Tombstone. They traveled together. They gambled together. They stood together when trouble came. Kate, who spoke 4 languages and had graduated from a convent school, hated Wyatt. She was jealous of the hold that Wyatt had on Doc. She felt that she was always competing with him for Doc's loyalty. And in a way, she was right. When Wyatt said, "Come to Tombstone," Doc went. When Wyatt said, "Ride with me," Doc rode. Their Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, Morgan, became the family Doc had lost, and Doc became the wild card brother they never asked for, but always defended. On October 26, 1881, Doc was 30. He weighed maybe 120 pounds. He was coughing blood up daily. He had every excuse to stay in bed at home, but Wyatt was walking to the OK Corral to confront the cowboys. Doc didn't have to go. Virgil Earp, the chief of police at the time, didn't even want him to go. Doc's reputation was volatile, to say the least. But Wyatt was going, so Doc went. 30 seconds. 3 cowboys dead. Doc's contribution was a shotgun blast at 6 feet, close range, defensive, brutal. He didn't kill Billy Clanton himself. He didn't fire the first shot. He just stood beside his friend when the shooting started and took a shot. Afterwards, he went back to the boarding house, shook. He told Kate it was terrifying. Kate said he cried. The movie never showed that. But they also never show the part that matters most. A dying man who walked into gunfire because his friend was walking into gunfire. After Morgan Earp was murdered, Wyatt Earp formed a posse and rode into the desert to hunt the killers. Doc rode with him, a man with TB, on horseback, across the Arizona desert, killing men. They had a falling out in Albuquerque. Doc got drunk and said something that offended Wyatt. The posse split up. Doc later brushed it off, said, "We had a little misunderstanding, but it didn't amount to much." They reunited in Colorado, said goodbye for good in Gunnison in 1892, and then met one last time in Denver Hotel in 1886, Doc was blind in one eye by then. He weighed 90 pounds. He told Wyatt, quote, "When I heard you were in Denver, I wanted to see you one more time before I go because I can't be lasting much longer." Wyatt's wife, Josephine, recalls that there were tears in Wyatt's eyes. Doc threw his arm around his shoulder and said, "Goodbye, old friend. It will be a long time before we meet again." He died 13 months later, 36 years old. Doc Holliday wasn't epic because he was a killer. He was epic because he was loyal. Because a dying man with nothing to gain and everything to lose chose again and again and again to stand beside his friend. He wanted to fix teeth. He ended up fixing the legend of the Wild West. But the real story was simpler than the movies. It was just two men that met over a card table and decided to have each other's back until death. If you want to hear the parts I couldn't say here, the parts about what TB actually does and did to his body. If you want to hear the parts about Kate, the woman that outlived him by 43 years, the raw version is on my OnlyFans page, linked below, pinned to the comment. Next episode will be Big Nose Kate, the woman they called a prostitute, because she was, who spoke 4 languages, witnessed the OK Corral, and survived the legend that swallowed Doc whole. I'm your Sonoran Desert Siren. See you in the next episode.